The studio lights burn bright, cameras locked in, and millions are watching live. Ari Melber leans back in his chair with a confident smirk, shuffling his notes like he already knows how this interview will end. His voice cuts through the air, smooth, sarcastic, calculated. He tilts his head and asks, "Congresswoman, do you actually understand the legal implications of what you're saying? Or is this just another viral moment you're chasing?" The audience in the studio goes still. Jasmine Crockett doesn't flinch. Her hands rest calmly on the desk, her eyes fixed on Ari, not with anger, but with a quiet, razor-sharp focus. A subtle pause fills the room. Producers glance at each other behind the glass, sensing something is shifting, but Ari keeps smiling, convinced he's in control. Then she speaks. "Ari, I don't need to chase viral moments. I create them when people in power think they can talk down to those they don't understand." For a second, silence. A beat of disbelief. Ari's smirk fades just enough for the cameras to catch it. A few gasps ripple from the crew. Someone in the control room whispers, "Did she just say that?" Across the screen, graphics flare as social media clips begin to flood online. Headlines flash in real time. Jasmine Crockett fires back at Ari Melber. Live on MSNBC. Another scrolls across. Did she really just say that on his show? The audience at home leans in closer, rewinding, sharing, clipping the moment before the sentence even finishes echoing. Ari clears his throat, trying to recover his rhythm. But it's already too late. Something in the air has shifted. Authority, control, expectation. Jasmine sits undisturbed, her posture steady, her expression unbothered, as though she's been here before, in rooms where she wasn't supposed to speak boldly, and did anyway. Viewers across the country grip their phones, waiting, no needing, to know what she'll say next. In that studio, under those harsh lights, everyone knows the conversation has changed direction. And this is only the beginning. This wasn't just another late-night political segment. This interview had been teased for days, billed as the clash between one of cable news' sharpest legal minds and one of Congress's fastest-rising progressive voices. The nation was already on edge. Debates about democracy, racial justice, and constitutional rights were dominating headlines. Clips from congressional hearings, viral speeches, and courtroom showdowns had become the language of political warfare. And tonight, millions tuned in expecting sparks. Ari Melber wasn't just any journalist. He was the lawyer-turned-anchor known for his precision, his calm control, his ability to corner politicians with their own words. He was respected, even feared in certain circles for how he used facts like blades, polished, calculated, never messy. So when he invited Jasmine Crockett onto his show, people assumed they knew how it would go. He would press. She would defend. And by the end, he would walk away as the calm victor of another televised exchange. But from the moment Jasmine responded to his opening jab, it was clear this wouldn't be a typical interview. Online, hashtags began to form just seconds after her comeback. Crockett vs. Melber, live showdown, respect black voices. Commentators tweeted mid-broadcast, unsure whether to cheer or gasp. Supporters of Crockett saw a woman refusing to bow to intellectual arrogance. Critics wondered if she had gone too far, too fast, on too big a stage. Because this wasn't about two people talking. It was about what they represented. Ari Melber embodied institutional intellect, measured tones, legal precedent, the way things have always been done. Jasmine Crockett stood for the voice that refuses to shrink, rooted in lived experience, unfiltered truth, and a refusal to let decorum silence reality. One spoke with polished confidence. The other spoke with a purpose that felt like it came from marches, courtrooms, and neighborhoods ignored by cameras until today. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled. They had expected a respectful debate. Instead, the tension was electric, too real, too raw to control. Every interruption from Ari now sounded sharper. Every pause from Jasmine felt intentional, a warning that she wasn't just answering questions. She was challenging the framework of the conversation itself. And yet, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush. She sat steady, breathing evenly, as if the entire weight of the moment couldn't shake her. Why did this matter so much? Because America wasn't just watching an interview. It was watching what happens when a black woman in power refuses to be intellectually dismissed on national television. It was watching whether truth could hold its ground against condescension. It was watching whether this moment would end in silence or in history. Ari leaned forward, trying to regain control, his tone gaining edge.
So, Congresswoman, if you're done with speeches, can you answer the actual question?
The studio tightened. Viewers held their breath. Even the air between them seemed to wait. What she said next wouldn't just flip the direction of the interview. It would flip the entire conversation happening across the country. Long before this moment under studio lights, Ari Melber had built a reputation that made his name synonymous with sharp intellect and strategic questioning. A lawyer by training, he entered the world of journalism with an edge that set him apart from traditional anchors. He didn't just report the news, he dissected it. Word by word, precedent by precedent, he pushed his guests, politicians, analysts, even activists, into corners where their contradictions had nowhere to hide. Audiences admired him for that. He was the anchor who quoted Supreme Court rulings, cross-referenced congressional transcripts, even brought rap lyrics into legal analysis with surprising fluency. He was smooth, calculating, undeniably intelligent. But beneath that calm exterior, there was something else viewers couldn't ignore, an air of superiority that sometimes drifted into condescension. Especially when his guest wasn't a senator or a scholar, but someone challenging traditional power from the outside. Clips began resurfacing online, shared by viewers who had seen this pattern before. One showed him questioning a young progressive activist. He smiled politely but interrupted repeatedly, asking, "Do you actually understand what constitutional law says about this?" Another had him debating a grassroots organizer fighting voter suppression. His tone stayed steady, but his phrasing, "Well, emotions are one thing, facts are another," came off as dismissive, undermining lived experience with procedural coldness. He wasn't cruel. He wasn't overtly disrespectful. But his words carried a quiet message. Reason belongs to people like me. Passion belongs to people like you. It was subtle, yet unmistakable to those who had lived their whole lives being talked down to with politeness that still tasted like power. Even his supporters saw it at times. Comment sections filled with praise, but also a recurring question. Is this journalism, or is this ego? He appeared too comfortable in his chair, too certain that he owned the narrative. And while critics of the left admired his ability to push progressives into defensive positions, others wondered if his style revealed more about his need to control the conversation than his pursuit of truth. Over the years, progressive voices had learned how to navigate his interviews. Some tried to match his tone. Others attempted to humanize the conversation, only to be brought back to the rigid lines of legal argument. Few ever unsettled him. Few ever made him hesitate. But tonight felt different, because Jasmine Crockett didn't walk into the studio trying to impress him, defend herself, or win his approval. She walked in holding her truth like a blade, not raised in aggression, but sharpened with purpose. And Ari wasn't prepared for that kind of composure. He was used to guests stumbling beneath the weight of his questions. She didn't stumble. She held steady. Behind his smirk was a pattern that was easy to miss if you weren't watching closely. His voice didn't rise, but his questions became slightly more pointed. His pauses became longer, almost daring her to falter. He didn't insult her, not directly. But every sentence carried a familiar undertone. "I am the authority here. You are the guest." In previous interviews, that was enough to unsettle people. Politicians would backtrack, activists would become flustered, and the audience would nod, amused by his wit. But tonight, the audience was shifting. Social media timelines weren't solely applauding him, they were questioning him. Why does he talk to her like that? Why does he sound annoyed she refuses to shrink? Clips began to circulate in real time. Split screens of Ari pressing her with thinly veiled sarcasm, matched with her calm refusal to react. It was slow at first, subtle, a shift in tone rather than an explosion. But viewers felt it. Something was changing. The control he held so firmly was slipping, almost invisibly but undeniably, because in this moment, Ari Melber wasn't just a journalist asking questions. He was a gatekeeper defending the structure he operated within, a structure built on credentials, decorum, and the belief that truth without polish was less valuable than an argument dressed in legal terminology. What he didn't see, what he couldn't see, was that this kind of condescension was no longer invisible to audiences. People were tired of civility being used as a shield against uncomfortable truth. They were tired of passion being dismissed as ignorance. They were ready for someone to finally push back, and tonight, that someone was Jasmine. He leaned in, prepared to regain his footing, confident that he could outmaneuver her with eloquence and legal precision. But what he didn't know was that the very thing he underestimated, her resolve, was about to turn this interview into a moment he could not control, and tonight, the fall wouldn't be loud. It would be quiet, undeniable, and witnessed by millions. Jasmine Crockett did not arrive in that studio by accident or privilege. She was shaped by streets where voices were often ignored, where justice felt distant, and where people learned to fight for dignity because no one was going to hand it to them. Born to hard-working parents who taught her that silence was not safety, she grew up watching neighbors denied their rights, families torn apart by systems built to overlook them. Those early years didn't just form her, they forged her. In school, she wasn't the loudest, but she was the one who listened, really listened, to stories of struggle and frustration. That's what pushed her into activism before she had a title, a platform, or even a microphone. She marched. She organized. She stood outside courthouse steps holding signs with names of people the country had already forgotten. And when protests weren't enough, she realized she needed another weapon: the law. Law school wasn't easy. She didn't come from lineage or legacy. She worked jobs between classes, studied at kitchen tables, and carried the weight of expectations no one could see. Professors admired her intellect, but warned her that the legal world wasn't kind to women who spoke too boldly, especially women who looked like her. She didn't flinch. She knew the law wasn't meant to be comfortable, it was meant to be challenged. When she became a public defender, she stepped into packed courtrooms where her clients weren't influential or wealthy. They were ordinary people whose voices trembled when they spoke. She defended those who had no one else. She walked into rooms where she was the only woman of color at the table and refused to shrink. Case after case, she earned a reputation not for being the most agreeable, but for being the most unshakable. She didn't win every battle. She lost sleep. She lost friends. She lost the illusion that change came quickly. But she never lost purpose. Then came the moment that shifted everything. A family in her district faced a wrongful eviction. No cameras, no headlines, just heartbreak. She fought the case, stood beside them when the system said, "You have no chance," and won. That victory wasn't just legal, it was human, and it lit a fire far bigger than one courtroom could hold. People started to ask her to run for office. She resisted at first. Politics looked like polished speeches and hidden compromises. But then she remembered something she once said in a small town hall. "If we don't sit at the table, they will keep deciding our lives without us." She ran, not with corporate donors or political machines behind her, but with volunteers, grassroots organizers, door knocks, and hope. They said she was too bold, too direct, too unwilling to play the game. She didn't care. She wasn't born to play it. She was born to change it. When she won her seat in Congress, it wasn't just her victory. It was a signal to every kid who had been told they were too loud, too passionate, too angry to belong in places of power. She stepped onto the House floor with the same fire she carried in the courtroom, unapologetic, grounded, and fiercely loyal to the people who sent her there. Her speeches weren't rehearsed to perfection. They were raw, honest, and filled with the weight of lived experience. She spoke about race, poverty, democracy, not as talking points, but as realities. Some praised her courage. Others whispered that she was too much. They told her to tone it down, to respect the process, to remember her place. She remembered it. Clearly, her place was not to bow. Her place was to speak, and that is what made her dangerous to those who thrived on decorum over truth. So when Ari Melber invited her onto his show, one of the most watched political broadcasts in the country, she understood the stakes. This wasn't just another interview. This was a test. A test of whether someone like her could sit across from someone like him and not just survive the conversation, but own it. Before the cameras rolled, she adjusted her microphone with steady hands. She didn't rehearse lines. She didn't calculate how to go viral. She carried something stronger than strategy. She carried purpose. Every trial she argued, every protest she walked. Every night she stayed up reading legal briefs when the world slept. All of it led her to this seat, under these lights, across from a host who seemed confident he could control the narrative. He didn't know her story. He didn't know the weight she carried. He didn't know she had already fought battles far, tougher than a smug question on live television. What he saw was a congresswoman. What he didn't see was a fighter. And as the interview began, viewers across the country sat up a little straighter. They sensed something different. She was calm, too calm for someone sitting under fire. Her voice didn't rise. Her eyes didn't blink. She waited, because Jasmine Crockett was not built for comfort. She was built for confrontation like this, and tonight, she was about to prove it. Ari leans back in his chair, a faint smirk curling at the corner of his mouth as the cameras continue rolling. His voice glides with practiced ease. Congresswoman, with all due respect, your interpretation of the Constitution sounds more like activism than law. His words linger in the air, sharp enough to draw a hush from the room. Jasmine inhales slowly, lips parting to speak, but he cuts in instantly. No, answer the question I asked, not the speech you want to give. A quiet laugh escapes him, amused, dismissive, as though he's already won. Jasmine keeps her posture steady, eyes fixed on him, refusing to flinch. Ari, if we're going to talk Constitution, she begins, calm and measured, let's at least be honest about... He interrupts again, louder this time. Honest? Congresswoman, I'm asking if you even understand what the framers intended. Laughter ripples through a few off-camera voices. She pauses, her silence cutting sharper than any reply. Viewers across the country start typing furiously. Tweets appear. He's not letting her speak. Why is he laughing like that? This is uncomfortable to watch. The tension in the studio shifts. No longer entertainment, but something deeper, something personal. Jasmine leans forward. Ari, I understand the law because I've fought for people who didn't have the luxury to debate it from a studio chair. Her tone is steady but firm. He raises a brow, smirking again. That's a powerful line, but it doesn't answer the question. His voice drips with condescension, like he's daring her to slip, to react in anger. He pivots the conversation. You've defended protesters who broke the law. Do you stand by that? His tone is accusatory now, as if he's building a case against her in real time. Jasmine opens her mouth, but he lifts a hand theatrically. Simple yes or no. Do you believe lawbreaking is justified if the cause is convenient? Her eyes narrow, not in anger, but in resolve. Convenient? She repeats softly. He shrugs, amused. Well, you make it sound noble. The live chat explodes. He's baiting her. Let her talk. Why is he being so smug tonight? Jasmine finally speaks. Ari, the people I stood beside weren't looking for convenience. They were looking for justice. There's a difference. He laughs, not loudly, but enough to be heard. Justice is a big word. Easy to say, harder to define. She doesn't waver. Justice isn't a slogan. It's a sacrifice. Ask anyone who's lost their freedom demanding it. Her voice lowers, steady like a drumbeat. The studio grows quiet. Ari shifts, his smile thinner now. So are you suggesting the law doesn't matter? He leans closer, eyes glinting with challenge. She shakes her head slowly. I'm suggesting the law was meant to protect the people, not silence them. He laughs again, this time louder, as if to reclaim control. Congresswoman, that sounds poetic, but law isn't poetry. It's order. He taps his pen against the desk, confident he's cornered her. And order doesn't bend to feelings. Jasmine meets his gaze unshaken. Order without justice is just control, she replies. For the first time, his smile fades just a little. Social media surges. Clips are already being clipped, captions added. She got him there. Replay that line. This just shifted. Ari clears his throat, shifting tactics. Okay, let's be real. You talk about justice, but your votes, your record, tell a different story. He lists bills, statistics, moments she went against party lines. His tone sharpens, precise like a courtroom prosecutor dissecting a witness. She listens without interrupting. When he finishes, his voice hangs in the silence, waiting to see if she stumbles. The studio crew watches closely now. No more snickering, just silence. Then Jasmine speaks. "Every vote I cast was for the people who don't get invited to tables like this," she says. Not for headlines. Not for applause. "For people who are tired of being spoken over," Ari interjects quickly. "And yet here you are, on national television, getting your applause." There it is. The challenge. The smirk returns. A dare. Jasmine leans in. "I didn't come here for applause," she says calmly. "I came here for accountability." The room freezes. Even Ari doesn't speak. For the first time tonight, the power shifts. Not loudly, not dramatically, but undeniably. The silence is electric. Online reactions explode. She flipped it. This is getting good. Did he just get humbled on his own show? And then, just before the next question, the studio falls into a silence so deep, it feels like the entire country is leaning in to hear what she'll say next. The silence in the studio was sharp enough to cut through. Ari Melber leaned back in his chair, eyebrows raised as if waiting for Jasmine Crockett to crumble beneath the weight of his last question. Cameras zoomed in. Producers held their breath. But instead of flinching, Jasmine leaned forward, her voice steady, calm, disturbingly clear. "You know what's interesting, Ari?" she began, her tone measured, not defensive, not angry, just controlled. "People love to quote the law when it protects their interests. But somehow, they go quiet when that same law protects the people they don't value." He blinked. Just once, caught off guard. She continued without hesitation. "Let's talk facts, not assumptions, not cable sound bites. The 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection under the law. That's not optional. That's not when convenient. And when lawmakers violate that, whether through voter suppression, discriminatory policing, or ignoring constitutional rights, they're not just wrong, they're lawless." Ari forced a smile, the kind meant to reclaim control. "Congresswoman, with all due respect," she didn't let him finish. "No, Ari. Respectfully, what you're doing is framing accountability as aggression. And I'm not here to make anyone comfortable with injustice." The control room went silent. Social media notifications exploded across screens, tweets like, "Oh my God, did she just say that?" And "roll the clip again," flooded timelines. But Jasmine wasn't done. "You brought up crime statistics," she said, turning slightly towards him. "So let's bring receipts. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics and the FBI's own Uniform Crime Reporting Program, the majority of violent extremist acts in the last decade have been carried out by far-right groups. Not immigrants, not black activists, and certainly not the communities fighting for equal rights. So if we're talking about threats to democracy, let's be honest about where they come from." Ari's smirk faded. He shifted in his seat. She pressed on. "And you mentioned protests. So let me be crystal clear. The First Amendment protects the right of the people to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. That means protesting injustice is not the problem. It's the point of democracy. Criminalizing protest while excusing actual threats to the government, that's hypocrisy." Ari attempted humor, a last effort to escape the tightening grip of her logic. "Well, someone's been doing their homework." Jasmine didn't laugh. "No, Ari, this isn't homework. This is my life. My constituents don't get the luxury of pretending these issues are theoretical. They live them." Every day, the air shifted. Her voice didn't rise, but the weight behind it did. "I grew up seeing people silenced because they didn't have power. Then I became a public defender and watched the law used like a weapon against those who couldn't afford protection. So when I see people with platforms use their voices to distort the truth, intentionally or not, I'm going to correct it. Not because it's convenient, but because it's necessary." Ari's eyes darted to the camera, then back to her, searching for an angle. A way back in. Nothing came. "And let's address this idea that asking tough questions is the same as being unbiased," she added. "You're smart. You know how narratives work. You know tone can be a weapon. You know interruptions aren't curiosity, they're control." The producers in the control room exchanged looks. One whispered, "We're clipped." This is going viral. She leaned back slightly, hands folded, posture unbothered. You asked why people don't trust institutions anymore. It's because they see double standards. They see certain politicians break the law without consequence. They see Congress members spread misinformation without accountability. And they see journalists, even good ones like you, sometimes treating truth like a debate point instead of a responsibility. Ari exhaled, quietly, almost inaudible. And yet, she said, voice softening but only slightly, people still show up. They vote. They march. They speak. Because they believe America can be better than its hypocrisy. That's what I believe, too. For a moment, the studio was completely still. Finally, Ari spoke, voice lower, less sure. So what you're saying is, I'm saying, she cut in, that patriotism isn't about protecting power. It's about protecting people. All people. The line hit like a gavel. Twitter, this is history. Clip saved. Instagram. Jasmine Crockett just ended this man's whole segment. TikTok edits were already forming with dramatic music and flashing subtitles, but Jasmine remained composed, not reveling in the moment, simply finishing her thought. And before this goes viral for the wrong reasons, she added, glancing at the camera, let me be clear. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here because the truth shouldn't require permission. Ari hesitated, then tried once more to regain footing. Congresswoman, nobody's denying your passion. But don't you think you're oversimplifying a complex issue? She smiled. Not mockingly, but like someone holding undeniable proof. Oversimplifying would be pretending injustice is complicated. It's not. What's complicated is admitting when the system benefits you at someone else's expense. He had no comeback. Across the country, living rooms, dorms, offices, people paused mid-scroll, mid-sentence, watching. Jasmine finished with the final blow, not shouted, but spoken like a promise. You can challenge me. You can disagree with me. But what you can't do is ignore the Constitution when it's inconvenient. Not on my watch. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of realization, of defeat, of respect. Ari opened his mouth as if to respond, but no words formed. And just like that, the moment became inevitable history, shared, clipped, replayed. What came next would shake every corner of the political world. The moment the segment ended, the internet detonated. Twitter, now X, was flooded within seconds. Notifications shot across screens like fireworks in a dark sky. Hashtags began climbing the ranks faster than producers could upload the replay. Crockett Clapback, Ari Melber owned, and She Did Not Hold Back rose to the top of national trends. Clips were clipped, captioned, slowed down, replayed with dramatic music, and shared millions of times within hours. One post read, Ari Melber tried it. Jasmine Crockett finished it. Another, paired with a screenshot of Ari's stunned expression, simply said, this is the look of a man who walked into a debate unprepared. TikTok edits appeared instantly, some with courtroom-style sound effects, others turning Crockett's words into remixed anthems flashing across millions of feeds. Instagram Reels layered her voice over cinematic drums. YouTube Shorts titled, Jasmine Crockett Destroys Ari Melber Live, crossed 1 million views before midnight. Newsrooms across the country replayed the clip. Morning panels paused scheduled topics to unpack what had just happened. On CNN, a commentator leaned forward and said, whether you agree with her or not, that was one of the most precise legal breakdowns I've seen on live television. On MSNBC, some defended Ari, calling it a spirited debate gone unexpectedly sharp. On Fox, pundits accused Crockett of being too aggressive, but even their viewers were sharing the clip, if only to argue in the comments. Politicians weighed in. Progressive leaders applauded her composure and clarity, praising her for bringing receipts, not rhetoric. A tweet from a fellow Congresswoman read, Jasmine Crockett didn't just speak, she educated the nation. Meanwhile, conservative voices scrambled to downplay the moment. Some accused her of disrespecting the press. Others claimed she was grandstanding, but none could deny the virality. Legal experts stepped into the conversation. Former prosecutors and constitutional scholars uploaded video threads breaking down Crockett's points. confirming the accuracy of her references to the 14th Amendment, the First Amendment, and federal crime data. A widely shared post by a Harvard law professor stated simply, "She was right on the law, every word of it." That post alone racked up hundreds of thousands of likes. Supporters across the country turned her lines into slogans. Patriotism protects people. Truth doesn't need permission. Etsy shops began selling T-shirts overnight. Meme pages turned Ari's silent reaction into a template. When you realize you invited your own downfall. But it didn't stop there. Comment threads lit up with debates. Some viewers wrote, "Finally someone stood up to media arrogance." Others argued, Ari didn't deserve that. But whether people praised or criticized her, they couldn't stop talking about her. Even celebrities joined in. Actors, musicians, and influencers reposted the clip. One posted, "I don't know politics, but I know confidence when I see it. She owned that room." Another wrote, "Power, poise, facts. This is what leadership looks like." In Ari Melber's own community, reactions were split. Some colleagues defended his record, calling him one of the fairest voices in media. Others admitted he had underestimated her. A quiet tension spread through media circles. Questions whispered in editorial rooms. Did this cross a line? Or did it reveal one? Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's team woke up to thousands of messages. Emails from supporters, invitations to speak, donations to her campaign spiked overnight. Her social media follower count surged by tens of thousands. Her team posted only one thing, a simple clip of her final line, captioned, "Truth doesn't need permission." Critics, however, scrambled to regain control of the narrative. Opinion pieces appeared arguing she was performing for clicks. Editorials asked if this was the future of politics or the downfall of civil discourse. But even those articles linked the video, and every click only amplified the moment. News outlets overseas picked it up. Headlines in London, Toronto, Sydney read, U.S. Congresswoman silences TV host in viral exchange. International viewers chimed in with comments like, "Wish our politicians spoke like this." Back in Washington, aides whispered in hallways. Committee rooms buzzed with talk of Crockett's performance. Some called it bravery, others called it risk, but no one called it forgettable. By the end of the day, one thing was undeniable. This wasn't just a viral moment. It was a ripple turning into a wave. And as the world kept watching, one question lingered louder than the applause or the outrage. What would this mean next? For media, for politics, and for Jasmine Crockett herself. In the hours after the chaos settled and the screens stopped replaying the viral clash, Jasmine Crockett's voice returned, not sharp or defensive, but steady and unshaken. She didn't gloat. She didn't mock. Instead, she reframed everything the nation had just witnessed. This wasn't about winning an argument or humiliating a host on live television. It was about something deeper, truth over spectacle, dignity over disrespect. She spoke softly but firmly in an interview released the next morning. "People think these moments are about going viral," she said. "But for me, it's always been about something simple, telling the truth, even when the room isn't ready to hear it. No dramatic lighting, no studio tension, just a quiet room and a woman who refused to apologize for speaking with clarity." She explained that representation isn't just about being seen on screen, it's about being heard, with the same respect given to anyone else. "Too many people are taught to shrink their voices just to be allowed in the room," she said. "But if you have to trade your dignity for a seat at the table, was it ever really a seat?" Her words struck a different kind of chord, not loud like the viral clip, but lasting. She spoke of young people, especially girls watching from neighborhoods like the one she grew up in. Kids who see power on TV every day but never hear their truth reflected back at them. "I didn't come here to play a part in someone else's script," she said. "I came to write my own." Commentators tried to pull her back into the spectacle, asking if she planned the clapback, if it was strategy or impulse. But she brushed it aside. "It wasn't performance," she answered. "It was memory. Every courtroom I stood in, every door that closed because someone decided my voice was too loud or too real. That moment wasn't rehearsed. It was lived. Then she delivered the message that would echo beyond politics and media screens. You don't need permission to speak truth to power. Power doesn't give permission. It tests you. It dares you to stay silent. And sometimes all you have is your voice. She didn't deny the tension or the backlash. She didn't pretend the criticism didn't sting. But she made it clear. Dignity isn't measured by how softly you speak. It's measured by whether you still speak when the world tries to silence you. In communities across the country, people shared that quote like a lifeline. Teachers printed it for classroom walls. Activists posted it outside courthouses. Mothers told it to daughters. It became more than a reaction. It became a reminder. And in that, Crockett turned a heated exchange into a lesson far larger than a single interview. She didn't seek to defeat Ari Melber. She sought to remind America of something it often forgets, that truth doesn't require a spotlight, a title, or a microphone. It requires courage. As the debate faded from headlines, the message remained. Power may sit behind a desk, in a courtroom, or on a news broadcast, but truth stands on its own. It stands in every voice that refuses to bend, in every person who speaks, not to win, but because silence was no longer an option. And so, as the cameras dimmed and the nation moved forward, one thing was left shining, not the clash, not the controversy, but the conviction behind her words. This was never just television. This was a declaration. You don't need permission. You just need the truth and the courage to speak it. Ari Melber tried to turn the moment into mockery. He smirked, he interrupted, he underestimated her, but Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She answered with facts, with law, with lived truth, and in front of millions the tone shifted. The laughter stopped. The studio fell silent. What began as a moment of disrespect became a masterclass in dignity and courage. This wasn't just a viral clash. It was a reminder of what real strength looks like. Calm under pressure, clarity when tested, truth spoken even when someone tries to silence it. Jasmine didn't win by shouting louder. She won by standing firm. And in doing so, she showed every viewer watching that your voice matters, even when the lights are bright, the cameras are rolling, and someone powerful is trying to talk over you. So if this moment moved you, don't just watch it. Be part of it. Stand with truth. Stand with dignity. Stand with every voice that refuses to be silenced. Hit like if you felt that moment. Hit subscribe if you believe voices like hers deserve to be heard. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded truth doesn't need permission. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it, because moments like this don't just make headlines, they make history.